Hey, it's Grady at Twin Creek Audio, back in the studio today with another mixing demonstration using the Soundcraft Sapphyre console. Today I'm going to be mixing a song from Homespun Centaurs' self-titled debut album. It's not a song that I've mixed before through the Soundtrax Topaz or anything. The song is called You Will Be Loved. I do have a link to the original released mix of this song in the video description. In fact, it's been there in a lot of the video descriptions over the last 6 months or so, but I'll put a link to this specific song at the top of all the links in the description for you to check out for comparison to the mix that I'm about to do with the Soundcraft Sapphyre. Before I do the mix, let me bring you in, show you what's on all the channels. There's not that many things. I'm doing like I did in the last video where I'm limiting it a little bit so you can hear the sound of the console itself rather than having a really dense mix with a lot of clutter, because to me that's not going to present the tone of the console that well, or at least as well as something that's a little more sparse. This is kind of a jazzy track, but it also has some really cool guitar textures and things in it. It's just a really interesting song, and I love the piano breaks in this song. They're just fantastic. And of course, that's the always fantastic Heath Rogers. I mean, this is a really, really cool song. So I hope you enjoy this mix. Now let's take a closer look at what I've got on all the channels on the console and the outboard gear that I'm going to use in conjunction with the console for this mix. Let me give you a quick rundown of what's coming up on all the channels of the console so that we can get on with this mix. I'm just going to go quickly through this time and not try to get into too much boring detail. Starting on channel 1, this is the way I usually do things anyway. It's kick, snare, then we have stereo toms, and then we have stereo overheads with the hi-hat mic blended in. Then we've got a room mic for the drums, which is actually up pretty loud because it's kind of a jazzy song, and so we really need that room sound. It's a mono room mic. Then bass guitar. Then we have stereo acoustic guitars. That is a combination of 3 different microphones on this song. Then we have the piano, which is fantastic sounding. Then we have an electric guitar that's playing some textures. It has some delay and some reverb and some cool stuff like that. Then this is the lead vocal track. And then here we have a stereo pair of channels that's for the background vocals. Over here on this blue fader on the far right of the screen, that's a stereo channel, and that's the reverb return from the Yamaha Rev 500. I'm only sending the vocal tracks and that electric guitar texture track. That's being sent to the reverb with the settings that I showed you a moment ago on the Rev 500. I'm not using any of the outboard reverb on the drums because I have the room mic, and so that's a perfect sound for this song. Is just a very natural sounding room mic. I'm using some of the wonderful Sapphyre EQ, starting over here with the kick drum. This is the low shelf, which is at 80 Hertz. I'm boosting that by 3 dB. I'm also boosting by 3 dB 2.8 kilohertz here on the high mid-frequency EQ. On the snare, I'm adding some 12 kilohertz with the high shelf, and then I'm also boosting about 3 dB of 7 kilohertz on the snare drum. It's played with brushes, so that's the reason for that high shelf boost. Then on the toms pair, I'm boosting some 80 Hertz with the low shelf EQ, and that's all I'm doing there. On the overheads, I have a little bit of boost at 7 kilohertz. That's all that's going on there. The room mic, I have some 12 kilohertz added with the high shelf, and then I'm also adding a little bit at 2K. Bass guitar, I've got some low end boosted, some 80 Hertz, and then I'm removing some about 400 to get rid of some of the boxiness. The main acoustic guitar, that has a little bit boosted and around 3K. And then I'm actually removing a little bit of low mids from one side of it, but not from the other. Moving on to piano, I'm boosting some around 3 kilohertz on the piano and the 12K high shelf. I'm boosting a little bit of that. This is the electric texture track. There's no EQ going on that. In fact, these are switched off, and it's same with the vocal tracks. These EQs are, even if the knob's turned, this isn't on. They're all turned off. So that's it for the EQ on the console. So the Sapphyre EQs actually sound really good. They're really powerful. They don't really cause a lot of phase problems, and a little goes a long way, but you have a lot of range on these EQs if you need it. Now, personally, I don't use a whole lot of EQ. The way I was taught in school was to use as little EQ as possible so that you don't get yourself into trouble with phase issues or anything like that. You don't mangle what the sound is. Try to get as good of a sound or the sound that you want at the source. That way you don't have to do all the work with EQ later and possibly destroy the sound. Here is our lovely, lovely outboard gear that we're going to use for this mix. I'm going to start from the top. I'm using the Yamaha Rev 500 digital reverberator, is what it says on it. I'm using the LA plate preset, and this time I didn't tweak anything about the preset. I called up that preset and it sounded just right for the song, so it's just the preset itself. 30 milliseconds worth of pre-delay, reverb time 1.8 seconds, high ratio 0.8, and of course the ER level, the effects levels 100, because we're going to blend that on the console, not inside here, although the Rev 500 does have the ability to do like a mix control that you'd see on a plugin. That's the ER level right there. I'm also using the Yuri LA10 on the bass guitar, which I've done in several other videos. Today I have the detector circuit set a little more toward the peak side. If you can see that, that's about 1 notch to the right of center. The attack is almost straight up and down, just slightly to the fast side of the middle mark. The release is a little bit longer because, again, we have a slower tempo track. The ratio is 3:1, and I am using a little bit of makeup gain just to get the gain staging with the console inserts proper. Then I've got the Symetrix 501 on snare drum because I love this thing on snare. It sounds really good. This time I'm using the automatic mode, which I think I did in the last video. I found with a quieter snare kind of sound that the automatic mode on this works really well. And the ratio is 2.2:1. And I am boosting the output gain here. The makeup gain is boosted by +6. This was played with brushes, so that snare track's not really hot, so we had to beef that up a little bit after we compress it, which is pretty standard, and that's why compressors have output gain, so you can make up the gain that's lost when you're squishing the sound with the compressor. Here is the lovely Soundcraft Sapphyre patch bay. You can see there on channel 2, I have the insert patched down to the 501 compressor, which is down here on the tie lines. I don't know if you can see that because the cables are in the way. There you go. 501 and LA10 are next to each other. The LA10, it's on the insert of channel 8 this time. Right there you can see those patch points for the send and return on the insert. And then of course we've got AUX 3 running there down to the input of the Rev 500. And then the stereo outputs of the Rev 500 are coming back up here to stereo 3B on the console, which is that blue fader just like in the last video. Then we also have the master outputs of the console, which are over here. Those are the master outs, and those are being patched into the interfaces through the tape send jacks on the Soundcraft Sapphyre patch bay. I'm going to do a whole video on this patch bay at some point, and I already did go over it some in some of my first Soundcraft Sapphyre videos. Check those out if you want to know more about the details of this console, because I did make those videos probably almost a year ago now. There's a series of 2 or 3 of those. I think we're ready to roll this mix now, so in 3, 2, 1, let's mix.
Whenever you're here, stars shine. The air is so clear. You will be loved. What are we saying? What do you know? These games we are playing, they leave us so cold. I'd give you a fortune, I'd give you the moon, I'd give you everything you need so soon. I can't afford a lot of things, like summer trips and diamond rings. But if I could give you anything, you would be love.
That was cool and it was really fun. And of course, the Sapphyre sounds great. You know, what can you say? This is a great console. I'm going to do a video here pretty soon where I compare this console to some of the console emulation plugins on the market and see how it does against those. Hint, it does really well against the console emulations, and it's not a Neve or an API. It really holds its own against some of the emulations. Maybe it wouldn't against a real API or a Neve console, but against the plugins that try to emulate those much more expensive console, the Sapphyre, it not only holds its own, but to me, I think it actually sounds better. I'm not sure. You'll have to see what you think, but that video will be coming up in the near future. I try to publish videos on Sunday and Thursday, but I do also have real work to do in the studio as well as another job. So I just do the best I can with these things. I appreciate all of the new subscribers and everyone's support. Make sure you all check out the links in the video description. That's all music that I've produced or been a part of, including my 3 solo albums, and all of those links, even streaming those, they don't cost you anything, but it helps support the channel. So make sure to check those out. I hope that you all have a wonderful day, night, evening, weekend, weekday, hour, minute, second, nanosecond, whatever it is you're having. Have a good one, and thanks so much for watching.